Session, there will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thank you. The first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Honorable Zungula. Honorable members, before we proceed, I would like to remind you that the virtual mini-plenary is deemed to be on the precincts of Parliament and constitutes a meeting of the National Assembly for debating purposes only. In addition to the rules of virtual sittings, the rules of the National Assembly, including the rules of debate, will apply. Members enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Assembly. Members should equally note that anything that is said in the virtual platform is deemed to have been said to the House and may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in shall be considered to be present and are requested to mute their microphones and only unmute when recognized to speak. The microphones are very sensitive and it will pick up noise which may disturb the attention of other members. And when recognized to speak, please unmute your microphone and where connectivity permits, connect your video. Members may make use of the icons on the bar at the bottom of their screens, which has an option that allows a member to put up his or her hand to raise a point of order. The Secretariat will assist me in this regard. Lastly, when using the virtual system, members are urged to refrain or desist from unnecessary points of order or interjections. I now recognize the Honorable Zungula, who will move the motion. The Honorable Zungula.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to yourself. Greetings to all of the honorable members. Colleagues, honorable members, today we move this motion that speaks to restoring the dignity of the people of this country who pre-1994 were subjected to colonial and apartheid rule by the colonizers and the apartheid regime. This apartheid and colonial regime did injustices over the people of this country, especially the traditional leadership, because when the colonizers came to South Africa, they did not find chaos. They found organized African societies that was guided by values, norms, cultures, and traditions that ensured peace, order, and harmony. And in that regard, governance was rooted in the people, and that is the truth of African civilization. When we speak about real leadership, it was not ceremonial. It was real leadership that governed with the people and ensured that there is a governance framework that protects the sanctity of life, protects the norms, the cultures of our people. However, these colonizers, when they came, their first target was to destroy the institution of African royalty. Hence, they targeted our kings, inkosi zethu, and the institutions of traditional leaders. Because these colonizers knew if you destroy royal leadership, you destroy the nation. Because the relationship between the people and the royal leaders, it is not just a leadership relationship, but it is a relationship that is anchored on ensuring that the cultures, the norms, the tradition, and the moral character of a country is upheld. So that is what characterizes South Africa pre the colonizers when they came. Now, we know for a fact that these colonial invaders imprisoned our leaders. Inkosi uJongomsobomvu, uMaqoma, Ingonyama uLangalibalele, and many other prisoners of our kings were the first political prisoners even before the struggle heroes which were fighting for political freedom were actually imprisoned in Robben Island. We know for a fact that when they imprisoned Inkosi nekumkani zethu, it is because they wanted to strip them of their authority. They wanted to humiliate and exile them to Robben Island so that they are removed from their people. And others were scattered from their lands. Hence, those colonial invaders then started over to take over their lands. This was not accidental. it was a deliberate political strategy designed to collapse African governance so that they, as the colonial invaders, could steal the land and weaken the communities. So that is the legacy of colonization. Therefore, when we speak about today's debate about Amahlubi, we want to really remind honorable members that the King Langalibalele I was one of the first political prisoners who was subjected and sent to Robben Island primarily for rejecting invasion, for rejecting the oppressive colonial rule. And as a result of that action by those colonial invaders, the Amahlubi were scattered across the country, the families were separated, and identity was fractured. We speak here now in a country 31 or 34 years into democracy, with an instance whereby the identity of Amahlubi is in limbo, because you find that because of these actions that went to destroy the identity and the culture of Amahlubi, it destroyed the nationhood of Amahlubi. That is why Amahlubi are not recognized in their own right in our country. Even the language of isiHlubi is not even one of the officially recognized language. Even the cultures that are practiced, the Department of Arts and Culture is not even legally mandated to protect and preserve the cultures of Amahlubi. And that is a result of the actions that were taken by that colonial government. So what we are calling for with this draft resolution, it is to understand that Parliament has got a legal obligation, a constitutional obligation of ensuring that there are policy, administrative, and instruments that respond to the cries of the people. It is in that regard that it becomes then important that we must support this particular draft resolution so that the Portfolio Committee on COCTA, over and above the work that they are doing, they need to zoom in into the issue of our kingship, the issue of traditional leadership, not limited to Amahlubi, because we know kukho namabomvana who suffered the same fate, kukhona nezinye izizwe in the country whereby there is instances of the lack of recognition by the state. Their languages are not well taken care of, they are not preserved. So that is what we are proposing with this draft resolution, because we need to have restorative justice in the sense that when the colonial government destroyed our royal leadership and our traditional institution, it is this parliament that must must have restorative justice so that we are able to bring back dignity to our people. And I want to conclude by really emphasizing that it is primarily the British that really destroyed our nations, especially Amahlubi. I've got, Chair, a letter that was written by the British embassy, that was written to the Amahlubi, where it recognizes Amahlubi king as king, which goes to show how they recognize their evil works, and they recognize that the true identity of Amahlubi was that it has a kingship. So that is what we are calling for when it comes to this particular motion. And we're hoping that the committee and the House itself at large will support this motion. We thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is Honourable Ndamase.
Apologies about my video, the challenges with my video, Honourable House Chair.
I understand.
Honourable House Chair.
You may leave it off, Honourable Member. You may proceed.
Honourable House Chair and Honourable Members, as the African National Congress, we will always encourage an understanding that the traditional leadership was the prime target of the colonial project because it was the pillar of the African societies, and we will continue to call this noble institution to continue occupying its rightful place as enjoined by our 30-year-old constitution. It is a historical fact that to obliterate the African socio-economic stability, the key was seen as the destabilization of the leadership of Africans at the time. This was the case during colonial and apartheid days. Honorable House Chair and honorable members, there were traditional leaders who stood in defense of our fatherland, facing the monstrous gunpowder of the colonial forces and apartheid brutality. Their list is endless, Honorable House Chair, as it covers the length and breadth of our country. Honorable House Chair, we cannot forget King Yinsa of Amaxhosa, Insundu Yonomsa, who fiercely engaged the colonial forces until they captured and brutally beheaded him. Inkosi uMaqoma of Amakhakhabe, Ajongumsobomvu, decidedly defeated the colonial forces around Intabakandoda until they captured and jailed him in Robben Island. King Mqikela and his son Sigcawu of Amampondo resisted the domination of his land by the Cape colonial government. King Boglen Ndamase of Amampondo stood firm and faced Cecil John Rhodes when he visited Zinkumbini in Libode to impose annexation in 1894. King Lobengula of Amandebele gallantly engaged the colonial forces. Inkosi uBhambata Kamancinza rebelled against the ridiculous colonial hut and dog tax. King Dinizulu of the Zulu nation was banished because he was too heavy for the colonial forces. Honorable Chair, in the 1960s, when Amampondo revolted against the suppression of their food security measures on their land in what is known as Pondo Revolt, Nkosi Mhlabu-Velile Hlamandani stood with his people and was banished to Transvaal by the apartheid government. This was the same with Nkosi Bhalisile Nkosiyane among Abathembu. King Sabata Dalindyebo of Abathembu continued the fight until he had to join the revolutionary forces in Lusaka in Zambia. Honorable House Chair, I dare say the heroic deeds of our traditional leaders are countless. Honorable Chair, through the 2003 White Paper on Traditional Leadership, the ANC government paved the way for the restoration of the dignity of traditional leaders. This flowed from the direction given by sections 211 and 212 of the Constitution. The platform for the voice of the traditional leaders was established with the creation of provincial houses of traditional leaders. In the recent times, the ANC government made laws that further opened the space for the voice of the traditional leaders at district or metro level, where local houses of traditional leaders have been established. Xa ndizawuhlala phantsi ke mhlala ngaphambili kweliqonga ndivumele ndicaphule kwimbongi yesizwe u-SEK Mqhayi egcwala emswaneni sisithwakumbe sokutshabalala kwemiphefumlo engapha kwama600 ngomhla wama-21 uFebruwari ngo-1917 kulaa mjelo wamaNgesi ekuthiwa yi-English Channel. Ndiyacaphula. Asinithenganga ngazo izicengo, asinithenganga ngayo imibengo, bekungenganzuzo zimakhwezikhwezi, bekungenganzuzo zingangeenkwenkwezi, kwafama khalipha amafana nkosi, agazi lithetha kwinkosi yeenkosi, akufa kwawo kunomvuzo nomvuka. Enkosi mhlala ngaphambili. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Mtetwa.
Greetings, House Chair, and I'm greeting you in the land of Nkosi Ungobese, in the place called Engutu local municipality. This is indicative of this topic we're discussing here today, and the matter that I've come here to resolve is exactly a conflict between Nkosi Ungobese and the local municipality of Engutu, wherein the current regime is saying to Nkosi that they are going to annex his land. These are the practices that we are befallen by due to the practice of the Roman, Dutch, and British law. As long as we continue to use the laws of the Romans, the laws of the Dutch, the laws of the British, we are not going to be able to resolve this matter, because the magistrate here in Engotu is still that magistrate as an agent of the British and the colonial era and the apartheid era, whilst neglecting Inkosi Ungobese, who is exactly in the land. He has just told me now this morning to say he is the one who actually bequeathed the local municipality the land upon which they are built, which means the entire town is actually on the jurisdiction of Inkosi. But how dare does this democratic dispensation neglect and ignore in plain sight evidence that says, here is the landlord, here is the land and the jurisdiction, but the bad thing that was done is that the Constitution, when it was crafted on the 8th of May to be enacted into law, it omitted a section in Chapter 12, which speaks about the powers of Amakhosi. So today, Amakhosi remain powerless because the Constitution has neglected their powers. Two, also, Ingonyama Trust was established in KwaZulu on April exactly to ensure that Amakhosi, they are owning 2.8 million hectares of land in KwaZulu. But when we get into the democratic dispensation, our late Ubaba Mandela and Umntwana kaPhindangene and FW de Klerk, they promised the Zulu king to say, you shall become a constitutional monarchy, asking him to be part of the elections in 1994. They agreed provided they honor the promise. 32 years later, that promise was never honored by our parliament. I had to remind this parliament 3 days ago to say, can we now raise a motion without notice wherein we remind this house to say, you promised a king. Now his son is on the throne. He's still waiting for the promise. Can we all agree to honor that promise? And the house agreed, which was a progressive move. No one opposed that, black and white, which is now charting a new way forward, which is gonna say native laws are gonna be applicable in the running of the country in municipal spaces, wherein though not the municipal council is in charge of the land, but it shall be the traditional council that will rule and make decision, then not the magistrate court that will be in charge of making judgment, but the tribal council and tribal court is gonna make the decision in terms of what pertains to their own land. That's how we ruled. We never ruled as an extension of the British, as an extension of the Dutch, as an extension of the Romans. The case of Ulanga Libalele Inkosi Yamahlubi, if you want to challenge that, you then have to challenge them Tetwas, because them Tetwas, actually their king, Tingswaya, who is my predecessors, they fled into endaweni yamaHlubi, coming from Empangeni in KwaZulu-Natal, which today you have to drive 4 hours to reach in Newcastle, which is currently where is my town, where I'm based. In that land, it is a land of amaHlubi, and I'm literally residing eMadlangeni, which is Amadlanga amaHlubi, which was a palace of King Langa Balele. The day they took him in 1873 was a day the so-called John Langa Libalele Dube of the first National Native Congress, who became the president, was voted in by Amakhosi in absence. It was a mark of time in 1873 that Ulanga Libalele is being taken to Robben Island as a king. When they released him, actually, they released him in a township called today Gualanga Township in Cape Town, of which that's where he resided, after whom that township it is actually named. It is in honor of King Ulanga Balele. Today, we are only limited to the late Babu Nelson Mandela as a freedom fighter who was taken to Robben Island, not knowing that 100 years before, He is being taken there. Amakhosi were taken there as a place to be banished into. Whilst they are imprisoned, Abelungu, the white people, Afrikaner and the British will then usurp and take over the land of Amakhosi, making them their own land. How do we then say this is legitimate, where today the same law that was used to dispossess us, we are still using the same law and we think it is holy? It is not holy. It is incumbent upon us to annul these Roman, Dutch, and British law, remove them if you want to have the powers of Amakhosi being restored. Because when King Tingswayo put King Shaka on the throne in 1816, he didn't use the British laws, the Dutch laws, the Roman laws. Though in Grahamstown by 1811, when it was established, they were already penetrating the space of Amakhosi, of the Xhosas, the Tembis, who were already there with the Khoi and the San. They squashed all the Khoi and the San from the city of Cape Town today into collapsing into Amakhosi of the Xhosas, so that they take that entire Western Cape terrain to declare it as a Dutch East India Company, wherein they will settle all the docking ships coming from the Western world, going to India, looking for spices in order for them to take them back, because the weather condition was such that it was too cold for 6 months and too hot for another 6 months. Those were extreme weather conditions. Today we are befallen by the same fate, whereby the Strait of Hormuz is locked jammed because America want an easy passage and want access to the natural resources of other nations. And now we are forced again, as history is repeating itself, where ships need to dock around the Cape of Good Hope as it used to be in those times. But never again shall it be that we should be oppressed by the same law. So we are watching Western Cape as they are claiming to want to be independent. We are watching the Jews which are being fled into Western Cape so as to stage a platform where they will declare that land independent from us. We refuse because there are native tribes, the Khoi and the San, who are based in that area, and that land belongs to them no matter what they say. So we need to ensure that we disengage ourselves with those who colonize us and remove even the laws. Once you change the laws, it will become the language of business and it will return to our native laws, which we are supposed to use. So we support this motion and this proposal because we understand the rule of Amakhosi has come and it has come to stay. And we, the descendants of Lao Makhosi, we are here in Parliament to watch and ensure that nothing
those kings.
is done. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Labuskaghni.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The matter before this House today is an important one because it speaks directly to governance, fairness, social cohesion, and the effectiveness of the systems Parliament creates. Embedded in our diversity as a nation are traditional leadership structures across our length and breadth. Traditional leaders are recognized in Chapter 12 of our Constitution, making them an integral part of our democracy. Further, we have the National House of Traditional Leaders, which is tasked with protecting and promoting leadership structures as an integral part of our nation building. We should also be proud that we have traditional leaders as parliamentarians serving the country, but more can be done. The continued non-recognition of certain traditional and indigenous communities as legitimate kingships or leadership structures has created frustration, uncertainty, and division in a number of communities across South Africa. This debate should therefore not be approached emotionally or politically, but practically and responsibly. The Democratic Alliance recognizes the institution important component of governance and community leadership in South Africa. Traditional leaders continue to play a critical role in dispute resolution, social stability, cultural preservation, and community engagement, particularly in rural communities. The DA also supports the recognition of legitimate traditional leadership structures. However, recognition processes must be fair, transparent, efficient, and consistent. And at present, there are serious concerns about whether the current system is achieving those objectives. Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Corporate Government and Traditional Affairs is currently processing the Traditional and Cohesion Leadership Bill. This bill presents an opportunity to strengthen the recognition framework, improve clarity, and resolve ongoing uncertainty around traditional and cohesion leadership structures. But legislation alone will not solve the problem. Implementation matters, oversight matters, and administrative efficiency matters. Honourable Speaker, the concerns being raised by communities and traditional leaders are not isolated concerns. Across various provinces, there are ongoing frustrations regarding delays in recognition processes, unresolved succession disputes, inconsistent support between provinces, limited administrative support structures, and insufficient communication from government. These concerns require Parliament's attention. The DA's engagement with traditional leaders and stakeholders across several provinces highlighted a clear sentiment. Communities want a recognition process that is credible, responsive, and accessible. That is why the DA's Federal Congress resolved to strengthen engagement with the traditional leadership sector through the establishment of a Traditional Leadership and Rural Communities Operational Directorate. The purpose of this structure is straightforward: to improve engagement, to coordinate issues affecting the sector, and to ensure that concerns raised by traditional leaders and rural communities are not ignored. Importantly, these engagements also highlighted practical governance concerns affecting communities, including service delivery failures, lack of development in rural areas, and unresolved leadership disputes. These are governance matters, and governance matters require accountable government. Honourable Speaker, one of the concerns raised repeatedly is the lack of consistency in the support provided to traditional leadership structures across provinces. Some structures receive administrative and institutional support, while others operate with very limited resources. This inconsistency creates instability and uncertainty. Similarly, the King's Forum, which was welcomed as an important platform for engagement, has not received the institutional support necessary to function effectively. Honourable Speaker, the DA believes that Parliament has a responsibility to ensure that the recognition framework operates fairly and effectively. This requires proper oversight of recognition processes, clear reporting timelines, administrative efficiency, consistency across provinces, and adequate support for institutions created through legislation and policy. This debate should ultimately focus on solutions. The recognition of traditional and indigenous leadership structures must contribute to stability, social cohesion, and effective governance. That requires systems that work. The DA will continue to support practical reforms, accountable governance, and constructive engagements with leadership leaders, with traditional leaders and communities, because recognition processes should build confidence in institutions, not frustration with them. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Kalipi.
Ngiyabulela kakhulu mhlali ngaphambili ezawuthathwa ngu-Honourable Bawalo Mathulelwa. Ngizothi ukuthi ke ngithi ke ayithabe Mahlubi ibe mthebelele mangelengele. Ndibulisa phaya ku-President we-EFF, ama-commissars ne-fighters egroundini. Chairperson, namuhla sikhuluma ngodaba olubuhlungu kodwa olubalulekile. Udaba lokuhlonitshwa nokubuyiselwa kwesithunzi sobukhosi bamaHlubi. Ekudala babakhona 1300 years ago. Esasungula nale formal liberation movement 114 years ago. Okuyikumkani ulanga libalele kaMthimkhulu wokuqala. Okungoku buphansi kwesilo ungangezwe lakhe inkosi umzwenkosi Johannes Radebe ulanga libalele wesibili umthimkhulu uBhungane uNosele phansi ke komhlaba wasemtshezi. So kuyiminyaka engama 52 isilo sihola isizwe samaHlubi ngokuzinikela, ukuhlakanipha nokubekezela. Kodwa kuyadabukisa ukuthi kuze kube namhlanje umbuso wentando yeningi usahluleka ukunikeza amaHlubi ubuzwe bawo njengombuso ophelele. Lokhu kukwehluleka ke kombuso ekubuyiseleni isithunzi sabantu abamnyama, amasiko abo nobukhosi babo. AmaHlubi ayisizwe esinomlando, amasiko nobuholi obucacileyo namakhosi angaphezulu ko-70 iSouth Africa yonke nakumazwe ase-Afrika nangaphansi kokhokta. Isaname zamaHlubi eziregistered phansi ko-Home Affairs zingaphezulu ko-500 chairperson. AmaHlubi ane-language yawo okudala eyitekela kudala futhi ibhalelwa nalendlu ukuze ikwazi ukuthi recognize isiHlubi sikwazi nathi ukutekela njengabantwana benkosi. Okhulumayo ke sihlalo ukwayi princess ke of the AmaHlubi nation, inkosazana yasemaHlubini uMadlomo uSibhushwana intombi ke yasemaHlubini. The economic freedom fighters rises in support of this motion because the struggle of AmaHlubi nation is not merely about a kingship title. It is about historical justice, dignity, identity, and the restoration of African people whose institutions were deliberately destroyed by the colonialism apartheid. The motion correctly highlights that the AmaHlubi people suffered forced removals, fragmentation of the leadership structures, and the erosion of their cultural heritage. The motion correctly highlights the AmaHlubi people that they are the only nation that is also the majority in South Africa in terms of the statistics SA. As the EFF, we have always maintained that the democratic state cannot selectively recognize African identities while ignoring legitimate historical claims of other indigenous communities. The Constitution recognizes traditional leadership and cultural communities, yet many African nations continue to face exclusion, uncertainty, and marginalization. However, Chairperson, this process must not become another endless consultation exercise that produces no tangible outcomes. Parliament must ensure that traditional leadership disputes are handled transparently, fairly, and consistently, free from political manipulation and selective recognition. The EFF believes that restorative justice means more than symbolic acknowledgement. It means restoring the dignity, identity, and rightful place of African people in their own land. The recognition of legitimate traditional communities must contribute towards social cohesion, unity, and development while preserving the cultural and historical heritage of our people. Sithetha nje sinamhlanje ke Chairperson sithetha phansi koba sisithi zininzi nezinto ezi-atheka kwalamaHlubi sisithi mawabe recognized. Uzawukhumbula ke mhlali ngaphambili into yoba maduze nje bekunesankxwe esithi makutshintshwe indawo yamaHlubi ibizwe ngoZulu. Lento esizisa apha ngaphambili asokukulwa nezinye izizwe kodwa kukufuna okwethu okubhilonga kuthi. Apha sitekela ngesilo esingekho phansi kwe-regional territory. Sithetha apha ngesilo esiphethe amakhosi across South Africa nangaphaya kwemingcele eAfrika. Ekudala ke isaziwa intoba nalapha eParliament sinamaHlubi amaninzi awakhona kule Parliament. IsiHlubi namaHlubi ayo just a cultural nje into yoba kuthiwe zii-cultures kucelebrate. Inkululeko yamahlubi iyothi kuzibuye kuba kurestorwe. Yingako sithe sifuna kurestorishwe inatsika isizwe samahlubi. Asithi makurecognizwe ngoba asosizwe esifikayo, sisizwe sasikhona nangaphambili. Ekunamhlanje sisithi restoration, sithi masivuselelwe. Asifuni into zokuthi kuphela urhulumente enze izithathu, asifuni kuphela ukuthi urhulumente enze izinto ezinganayo i-meaningful impact eziza emahlubini. Amahlubi njengoko engu-70% kwipopulation yaseSouth Africa, sithi namhlanje mahlubi ixesha lenu lifikile. Sithi sukumani kwindawo enikuzo, nibe khona kuzo zonke ezi processes. Sikwacela mhlali ngaphambili, siyayibona imotion ithetha ngoMatshi kunyaka ozayo. Into yoba nike nizama ukuyikhawulezisa ungaphelanga lo nyaka. Into yoba isizwe samahlubi sifumane i-recognition.
Thank you. Thank you.
I support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. May I ask the table staff to pay attention to the interpretation services? There are some members who are getting the service, and most of the other members cannot get the interpretation when members switch over to their vernacular. This places members who are coming later in the debate at a disadvantage because they want to debate the matter, and it needs to be attended to immediately. The next speaker is the Honorable Ngobesi.
Honorable Chair, honorable members, allow me not to switch on my video as connectivity might be a challenge.
You may proceed, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, the Inkatha Freedom Party acknowledges the importance of recognizing certain traditional and indigenous community as legitimate kingships. The Republic's history of colonialism and apartheid disrupted traditional governance systems and undermined the identity and dignity of many communities. The question of recognition are therefore not merely administrative matter, but issues connected to heritage, legitimacy, and social cohesion. The IFP has consistently supported and advocated for the role of traditional leadership as a living institution that continues to contribute to governance, cultural preservation, and community stability, Honorable Chair. However, while the concerns raised may be valid, we believe Parliament must be careful not to duplicate functions already within the mandate of the Department of Corporate Governance and Traditional Affairs, and the statutory structures established addresses these matters in some point. The Republic already has a legislative and administrative mechanism to investigate disputes related to the traditional leadership and the recognition of kingships. Parliament's role is to exercise oversight over whether the institutions are functioning effectively, fairly, and transparently, not to substitute itself for them. The white paper on local government recognizes the important role of traditional leaders in governance and community development, particularly in rural areas. The white paper has envisaged cooperative governance between municipalities and traditional institutions to strengthen the participation, accountability, and development of at the local level. This means that traditional leadership matters must be handled within coherent governance frameworks and through proper constituted institutions rather than through overlapping and parallel parliamentary interventions that may create uncertainty and confusion along the line. The oversight should therefore focus on whether the applications are processed efficiently, whether affected communities are consulted meaningfully, and whether these decisions are taken free from political interference or bias. We must also recognize the matters relating to kingships and traditional recognition are highly sensitive and can deepen tensions within the communities if handled inconsistently and irresponsibly. Any intervention must therefore strengthen unity and social cohesion rather than inflame disputes. Honorable Chair, the Constitution recognizes institutions of traditional leadership subject to constitutional principles and the rule of law. Recognition processes must therefore remain guided by fairness, evidence, historic content, and administrative integrity. We support a strong accountability, whether there is evidence of state failures or administrative delays. However, we do not support creating overlapping parliamentary processes that duplicate the Department of Corporate Governance and Traditional Affairs' mandate. What is required is not another layer of bureaucracy, but improved efficiency within the structures that already exist. Honorable Chair, I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Van Wyk.
House Chair, greetings to all the members on the platform. This debate is in honor of NUSEP Anthony Peterson from the Keiko Royal House in Bloemfontein, who has passed on last night. May his soul rest in peace. Honorable Speaker, honorable members, this House must confront a painful truth. Despite our constitutional commitment to the restorative justice and social cohesion, systemic gaps continue to deny recognition to certain traditional and indigenous communities as legitimate kingships. This denial is not only unjust, it is unconstitutional. Foremost amongst those excluded are the Khoi and San peoples, the First Nations of this land. Their history predates colonial conquest. Their culture is woven into the very fabric of South Africa, and yet their rightful place within our system of traditional leadership remains contested and diminished. This is a betrayal of our democratic promise. Parliament cannot remain silent while the Khoi and San and other indigenous communities are sidelined. Recognition is not charity, it is justice. It is the restoration of dignity of those whose heritage was erased, whose voices were silenced, and whose leadership was denied. Therefore, this House must exercise its oversight role with urgency. We must intervene to redress these systemic gaps, to ensure that every traditional and indigenous community is recognized fully and fairly, and to affirm that our democracy surely belongs to all who live in it, not just those historically privileged. We must support we must support the Commission on Khoi and San matters in order for them to execute the mandate to recognize Khoi and San leadership. Too many of our Khoi and San leadership passed on without seeing the promised land, in this case with NUSEP Anthony Peterson. Honorable members, the recognition of Khoi and San is not symbolic. It is constitutional imperative. It is the fulfillment of a nation's promise of equality, justice, and unity. On behalf of the Patriotic Alliance, we would like to send our condolences to the Peterson family, especially to Nolene, the children, and the extended family. Amase, Nusep Anthony Peterson, Amase, long live.
The next speaker is the Honorable Boshoff.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. I just request also to put off my video.
No, please do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. This whole question about the recognition of different communities, kingships or otherwise, is actually at the very heart of the nature of South Africa, what South Africa is in its essence. Now, traditional communities, not only in South Africa or even in Africa, but all over the world, the political entity was actually a community. The authority of a traditional leader were over his subjects, not over a geographical area. That tended to change first when empires were formed, and in an empire, different communities would be ruled by their own law wherever they were. So geographically they would overlap, but in culture and in practices and in law, each would be according to their own community. Now, in that sense, it cannot be argued against that in South Africa, traditional leaders were the people who were defeated by colonial overlords, and that it was traditional leaders who lost their authority. When the decolonization of Africa took place, the authority was not given back to traditional leaders, but to states which tried to be, or which presented themselves as nation states. But the essence of a nation state is, again, a kind of homogeneity in terms of cultural practices and identity, which is not the case in any one of African colonies, also not of South Africa. Now it is of the essence that the state recognizes the diversity within the state, but a symbolic recognition without authority doesn't mean anything. It is just giving some air of responsibility without any real responsibility, and that is what should be under continuous review. There's not a time that we say, okay, we've done this, we don't need to review it anymore, because there are always conflicting and overlapping authorities, some claiming authority over other communities, while the other communities may not recognize that. And that becomes a continuous problem in recognizing what South Africa is at heart. Now, that is important for communities like the Amatrubi, which is actually at stake today, but it's also important for Khoisan communities, and it is also important for the Afrikaners as a nation, because what happens in South Africa is, because of a relative affluency of Afrikaners and the previous position of authority, it is reckoned that they should just act as individuals within South Africa. But as individuals, Afrikaners is a very small minority, which also needs recognition and authority which goes with it to maintain its own identity and to prolong that, not just to survive as individuals, but to survive as a nation. So this whole issue of recognition of communities and their authorities is very important and at the heart of what we should be doing. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Dr. Tlape.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just providing a video for proof of life, and may I be allowed to...
Proof of life has been confirmed, Doctor. You may proceed. That's a good pun. Please proceed.
Today's resolution by Honourable Zungula to ensure oversight and intervention where needed into the continued non-recognition of certain traditional and indigenous communities is one that Action SA supports. This resolution speaks about dignity, identity, heritage, equality before the law, and the constitutional promise of restorative justice in a democratic South Africa. Section 211 of the Constitution recognizes the institution, status, and role of traditional leadership, subject to the Constitution itself. The recognition was intended to restore dignity to communities whose systems, cultures, and governance structures were undermined and distorted through centuries of colonialism and apartheid. Yet, despite this constitutional commitment, many communities continue to raise serious concerns about exclusion, inconsistency, delays, and unequal treatment in the recognition of traditional and indigenous kingships. Parliament has to intervene where legitimate claims remain unresolved for years, where processes appear opaque, or where some communities believe they are being ignored while others receive recognition. We have a constitutional responsibility to ensure that the process followed by the state are fair, transparent, lawful, and free from political manipulation. Traditional leadership remains deeply important in many parts of South Africa. Traditional structures continue to play a vital role in preserving culture and heritage, resolving disputes, promoting social cohesion, and supporting local governance and development. For many communities, these institutions are not symbolic relics of the past. They remain living institutions with real social legitimacy. However, Action SA wishes to emphasize that the recognition of traditional leadership must always exist within the framework of the Constitution and the supremacy of the Bill of Rights. Like all institutions, they must recognize the state, they must accept and uphold the constitutional values that underpin our democracy, including human dignity, equality, non-racialism, and non-sexism. In particular, gender equality cannot be compromised under the guise of culture or custom. While South Africa must protect and respect its cultural diversity, traditional practices must evolve in a manner that aligns with constitutional principles and the rights guaranteed to all citizens, especially women and vulnerable groups. It is therefore imperative that our communities are continually educated about constitutional values and the relationship between customary practices and the relationship and democracy. Social cohesion can only be strengthened when communities understand that cultural preservation and constitutional supremacy are not mutually exclusive, but must work together. We must remember our coat of arms talks about diverse people unite, not unity in diversity. Action SA believes that there must be proper oversight into whether the existing mechanisms and commissions responsible for recognition are functioning effectively and fairly. Parliament must determine whether system gaps, bureaucratic inefficiencies, legal ambiguities, or political interference are contributing to the continued non-recognition of certain communities. South Africa cannot speak meaningfully about nation building while some communities feel excluded from full recognition and equal treatment. Restorative justice requires more than words in the Constitution. It requires action, fairness, accountability, and unwavering commitment to constitutional values from the state and all recognized institutions. For this reason, Action SA supports the call for parliamentary oversight and intervention to identify and address systemic failures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Thring. Is the Honourable Thring on the platform? If not, we proceed.
Chair, I'm taking part in the next topic, not this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Thring. The Honourable Kwankwa. Is the Honourable Kwankwa on the platform? Rice. Bosa. The ANC, the Honourable Sompa Masui. The ANC.
Chair, honorable members, we have been called to debate the matter that concern indigenous communities in South Africa and their traditional leaders. For us, this is an important matter which was always formed part of our agenda in Parliament and in our everyday life as the ANC. Because indigenous rights are human rights. They are not instruments of primitive life, but instruments of livelihood and present day-to-day lives of people of South Africa. In 1948, the United Nations passed a resolution, the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights. This milestone coincided with South Africa implementation of a representative policy called apartheid. This is why the South African delegation refused to be part of the resolution because they knew that they were repressing human rights in South Africa. Article 27 of Declaration notes, everyone has the right to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the art, to share in scientific advances and benefits. In 2007, the UN General Assembly passed another resolution on 13 September, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which noted that indigenous people have suffered from historical injustice as a result of inter alia, their colonization and dispossession of their land, terrorized and resourced, thus preventing them from exercise, in particular, their right to develop in accordance with their own needs and interests. Unlike other nations on the world, South Africa always ahead when it comes to the protection and recognition of indigenous communities. Traditional leaders in South Africa are part of the fabric of the society. They are founding fathers of our society. Our political and their struggle credentials are undisputed. In more material ways, they are the trustee of lands that millions of our people reside in. Traditional leaders oversee this precious source on behalf of the people of South Africa. Under the government of the ANC, traditional leaders, we have sought to move beyond just recognition, but also provide material resources such as benefit for leaders to ensure that they are able to carry on their duties in their indigenous communities. In South Africa, Constitution recognizes traditional leaders and indigenous community in Chapter 12. It does not end there. It goes further to instruct our courts to apply customary law when applicable in matters before them. This is recognition that indigenous communities are an essential part of our South African society. The Municipal System Act in local government recognizes the role of traditional leaders and custodians of the society. In the course of our democracy, we have established the House of Traditional Leaders, presiding over the traditional leaders. The President of the Republic of South Africa address the House every year to brief the House of Government plans and the roles of traditional leaders are expected to play in line with the country priorities as outlined in the medium term development plan and other frameworks. In the previous administration, the COPTA began to work to quantify customary laws of succession, working closely with research institutions. This exercise will help deal with succession disputes and ensure that there is less conflict. There are numbers of the legislation that Parliament is processing as the oversight body, chief being the traditional and the cohesion leaders bill, which Parliament have studied to see to conclusion. In this, it is our view that the available legal framework and instruments are important reminder of the high regards we place on indigenous communities and their system of traditional leaders. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Is there a speaker from Al Jama, the NCC, the UAT, the Honourable Van Zyl of the DA?
Honourable Chairperson, firstly, I would like to take this opportunity to pay our respects to Queen Maputi Rinalanga from Lephalale in Limpopo, who has sadly passed on the 1st of May 2026. May her soul rest in peace. Condolences to the royal family and the broader community. Chairperson, today we are talking about more than rules on paper. We are talking about people, families, elders, and young people in our rural communities who depend on clear, fair, and timely decisions about who leads them. When recognition processes drag on or feel arbitrary, it is not only the administrative failure, it fractures community life, stalls local development, and erodes trust in the institutions meant to serve them. I'm proudly from the Eastern Cape, where traditional leadership is a pillar of society. It is so wonderful to get to live in a democracy with such cultural richness. Traditional leadership plays an integral role in our democracy, and the strides we have made are notable. Traditional leaders are represented in our constitution, legislative process, and are public representatives across the country. Our country's past ethnic and racial divisions should not be lost to any one of us. In our democracy today, we stand as an example of change that happened, from a country on the brink to a dynamic country with immense potential. Traditional leaders in our country are present to help us in pursuing our country's fullest potential. The Democratic Alliance is committed to understanding and celebrating the importance of traditional and indigenous leadership in our country. These leaders provide cultural guidance, settle disputes, and nurture communities. We wish these institutions would thrive, but only if recognition systems are fair, transparent, and accountable. That is why the debate is important. We welcome the traditional Khoi and San leadership bill as an opportunity to resolve long-standing problems. But a law alone is not enough. We must be honest about whether the machines of government can actually deliver on what the law promises. Implementation, clear timelines, and adequate resources, consistent provincial support, and visible accountability is the measure of success. Across provinces, the DA has heard the same concerns again and again. Recognition and succession processes that take too long, unresolved disputes that poison community relations, uneven support from one province to the next, and weak communication from government. These are not technicalities. They ripple out into people's everyday lives, delaying development projects, complicating access to services, and leaving communities in limbo. Consider the Gauteng Commission established in November of 2022 to address leadership disputes. Communities were told this would bring clarity and resolution, and nearly 4 years on, there is still insufficient public information about its findings or progress. That uncertainty is unacceptable. Government processes must have clear deadlines, and when those deadlines slip, Parliament must demand explanations. We also need to look at national structures intended to support traditional leaders. The King's Forum was a welcome initiative, a platform that could strengthen coordination and dialogue. Yet it appears to lack basic operational support, dedicated office space, administrative staff, reliable communication channels. A body without the means to meet and act is only symbolic. If the state establishes structures, it must give them the tools to function. So what should our oversight focus on? It must be practical and measurable. Are recognition applications processed within reasonable timeframes? Are succession disputes being resolved, not prolonged? Are provincial departments providing consistent administrative and financial support? And are communities getting clear, timely communication from government? The DA has taken steps of our own. Our Federal Congress resolved that we should strengthen engagement with traditional leaders and rural communities, and we have set up a dedicated directorate to coordinate that work. We are doing this because meaningful reform requires steady, respectful engagement with the people most affected. Honourable Chairperson, this debate need not be polarizing as most previous speakers have done. We should use it to build better systems that are transparent, efficient, properly resourced, and accountable. Parliament has an opportunity now, through legislation and scrutiny, to restore confidence in the recognition framework. The DA will continue to push for fair recognition processes, faster dispute resolution, and a capable state that delivers on its promises. Let us be clear. Improving these systems is not a matter of political point scoring. It is about restoring stability, dignity, and hope to the communities across country. For those reasons, we must act with urgency, clarity, and fairness. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Direko.
Thank you, House Chairperson, fellow members, ministers and deputy ministers, and South Africa at large. The matter before us speaks to a broader national question in South Africa. The ANC, through more than 100 years of struggle, understand that South Africa is a diverse country made up of many communities, cultures, and racial groups. However, we do not see these communities as a separate nation. We see them as one people forming a united South African nation under one democratic state. For this reason, we must reject narrow nationalism and any action that divides us as the people of South Africa. At the same time, we must continue protecting the constitutional right of indigenous communities, including their rights to culture, tradition, and language. Although our democracy is 32 years old, South Africa has achieved a lot compared to many countries around the world. But we must never forget our history, because our history helps us to understand and solve the challenges that we face today. House Chair, more than 100 years ago, King Moshoeshoe won 4 wars to defend his people and land against colonial invasion. In the same way, King Langalibalele I resisted colonial oppression. Because of this resistance, he was arrested, exiled, and later imprisoned on Robben Island, a prison that became a symbol of suffering and struggle of the Black people in South Africa. Today, only a short distance from here, in Cape Town, there is a township called Langa, named after Langalibalele. The name remains a symbol of resistance and a reminder that the struggle for dignity and justice continues. House Chair, in 2016, a bronze statue of Langalibalele was unveiled at the Castle of Good Hope to honor his contribution to the struggle of our people. Before that, in 1998, Amahlubi were legally recognized as an indigenous community with constitutional and land rights. We also recognize that Amahlubi community is spread across many parts of South Africa and beyond, because of migration, historical conflicts, and colonization and apartheid. As the ANC, our approach to indigenous communities has always been guided not only by history, but by legal and constitutional processes that seeks to restore dignity, justice, and recognition to all the communities. The establishment of the Nhlapo Commission was part of this commitment. As ANC, we are not in a position to decide which traditional community is legitimate or not. Doing so will create unnecessary conflicts because these matters are complex matters that requires proper legal and historical understanding. For this reason, when the ANC accepted the outcomes of the Nhlapo Commission, it was not because some people won and others lost. It was because we respect the legal process and the decision of government. At the same time, ANC leaders travel across the country explaining the outcomes and the position of the movement. Today, we understand that Amahlubi have taken the matter for the constitutional review through democratic and legal channels. We respect their decision to use constitutional process rather than other means. The ANC fully support the democratic right of communities to seek legal clarity through the courts, and we will continue respecting the outcome of the courts. We continue to value the importance played by Amahlubi communities in building our democracy and contributing positively to our society across the country and beyond. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Magau.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Mandikale ngokubulela bethuna elithuba. Dibulele ipati zonke ezithe zaxhasa emotion ye-African Transformation Movement. This is an indication, House Chair, that kukhona amathuba apho we have to put aside the political differences and ideology and focusing on unifying South Africa. You know, by restoring the dignity of kings and traditional leaders, especially the one we are debating for today, Amahlubi, is an indication that sikuyo indlela elungileyo yokubuyisa isidima nesizwe somntu omnyama. Thank you to all the political parties who have supported this motion. Today, this House is confronted with a matter far greater than administrative recognition. We are confronted with the unfinished business of justice. The motion before us forces this parliament to confront an uncomfortable truth. Colonialism and apartheid did not only dispossess African people of land and economic opportunity. They systematically dismantled African kingdoms, destroyed indigenous governance systems, fractured nations, and attempted to erase the very identity of African people. The Amahlubi nation stands today as one of many living symbols of that painful history. For generations, African traditional communities were deliberately weakened because colonial powers understood that strong African kingdoms represented authority, unit, resistance, and self-determination. The strategy was simple: divide the people, manipulate successions, fragment kingdoms, distort history, and replace indigenous authority with systems designed to serve colonial control. That assault did not end in 1994. The scars remains with us today. How can we speak of reconciliation while some communities still fight to have their identity recognized? How can we celebrate constitutional democracy while legitimate indigenous nations continue to live under historical uncertainty created by colonial governments? How can we claim to restore dignity to African people while many traditional communities remain trapped in unresolved dispute, fragmentation, and institutional regrets? The Constitution recognizes traditional leaders and indigenous cultural communities, but recognition in principle means very little when communities continue to experience exclusion in practice. The Amahlubi matter is therefore not merely about one nation. It is about whether democratic South Africa truly has the political courage to correct the deliberations destruction of African identity. The suppression of African kingship was not an administrative accident. It was a weapon of conquest. It was part of a broader machinery designed to strip African people of sovereignty, pride, language, culture, and social cohesion. Entire government system that existed long before colonial borders were reduced, distorted, or dissolved to suit the interests of foreign powers and later the apartheid states. And today, when communities seek restoration through lawful and constitutional means, they are too often met with delays, bureaucratic resistance, and endless process that deepen frustration and instability. The ATM believes Parliament cannot remain passive in the face of this reality. To EIFP, oversight is not interference. Oversight is a constitutional duty. If there are legislative gaps, policy failures, or administrative injustice preventing the proper resolution of these matters, then this House has an obligation to confront them honestly and decisively. There is no duplication at all. True nation building cannot happen while indigenous communities continue to feel historical erase. Social cohesion cannot be achieved while legitimate claims to identify and traditional authority remain unresolved. Peace within communities cannot prevail where there is a lingering sense that justice has been postponed indefinitely. This motion is therefore not about division, it's about restoration, it is about healing, it is about confronting historical injustice with honesty instead of silence. Most importantly, we believe Parliament must never become comfortable with the continuing consequences of colonial injustice simply because time has passed. History may have attempted to silence nations such as Amahlubi, but justice demands that democratic South Africa finally listens. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. That concludes the debate on this motion. Honourable members, you are reminded that the decision on this motion will be taken in a full plenary session of the National Assembly. We shall now proceed to the last item on the order paper, which is a subject for discussion in the name of the Honourable N Malematja on accelerating support for small enterprises, cooperatives, and entrepreneurs in townships and villages by focusing on financial inclusion, infrastructure development, and regulatory relief. I now recognize the Honourable Malematja.
Thank you, Chair. I was trying to show the video. Unfortunately, it's not showing. Am I audible?
You are audible, Honourable Member. I suggest you switch off your video.
Thank you so much. Thank you, House Chair, fellow honourable members, fellow South Africans. The economy has turned down the corner with the modest economic growth and increased employment. From here on, we will need to take formative action to grow the economy further and ensure job creation. However, dealing with the challenges of poverty, inequality, unemployment, and historical economic exclusion, to correct the historical injustice of the apartheid era and to ensure reversal of historical economic exclusion. Economic empowerment is necessary for the majority to effect transformation and create a better life for all. Therefore, there is a need to accelerate infrastructure development that creates the basis for microeconomic development through the district development model to ensure that the acceleration of MSMEs and cooperatives in township and villages have the key drivers in place to success. The drivers include electricity, water, efficient transport, logistics. ESCOM has came to the party in eradicating load shedding and is working with the Department of Electricity and Energy to reduce load reduction, which affect township and rural villages. This approach by the ANC through dealing with the fundamental drivers is to ensure microeconomic development through locally inclusive economic growth in job creation. We are opposed to jobless economic growth. Since the ushering in of democracy in 1994, the ANC initiated a program for the development of MMEs and cooperatives to ensure economic empowerment of the historical disadvantaged and the country undergoes economic transformation. The ANC has long recognized that MSMEs and cooperatives are the engine of inclusive economic growth and job creation. Therefore, decided to drive development of MSMEs and cooperatives through ensuring financial support, technical support, and business support. However, while there are measurable success, we need to deal with structural factors for further acceleration development of the sector. The budget is an instrument of economic transformation for the historically disadvantaged communities, among other social deliverables. Advanced economies and developing economies are dependent on MSMEs and cooperatives for making major contribution to GDPs and employment. This sector is the heart of all economies. House Chair, it is in this context, at this conjuncture, that we require the accelerated development of MSMEs and cooperatives in township and rural area as part of microeconomic development through DDM model. Small, medium, micro enterprises and cooperatives are fundamental engines of global and local economies, driving inclusive economy, innovation, and most critically, local job creation. They act as the lifeblood of local communities, often contribute to economic resilience during the downturn and when the large cooperatives may downsize. Furthermore, MSMEs in global terms contribute 90% of formal business and contribute 5 to 70% of employment. The contribution of this sector to GDP in global terms is around 50%. In South African SMEs comprise 91% of businesses and contribute only 34% of GDP, in which is below the global average and below the average of 40% in developing countries, with making substantial contribution to economic activity. This is demonstrated by the fact that some 3 million formal and informal entities employ 80% of those employed in the amount of some 13.4 million people. The total number of people employed in South Africa is 17.1 million people, indicating the high percentage of the people employed in the sector. House Chair, this clearly demonstrates that the sector is the engine of economic development in most countries. In 1994, there's some 800,000 MSME, according to the white paper on the small development, which through the ANC government program grow up to 2.5 million in 2004 and up to 2.7 million in 2014. This is the hallmark of successful program, which is underfunded. Small and medium enterprises were a vital engine of industrialization, employment, export growth for the Asian tigers, often acting as the flexible innovation backbone supporting massive conglomerates, while large state-supported firms focus on heavy industries. SMEs provided the necessary industrial leakages and created decentralized and resilient economic structures. Most importantly, House Chair, the current contribution of MSMEs is microeconomic development that is critical to a local economic development and job creation. In our case, this must occur through the district development model to harness the necessary economy of scale. In our context, MSMEs are a critical vehicle for transformation, removing the challenge of poverty, unemployment, inequality, and historical economic exclusion. Only a distorted free market economy leaves the majority of the population outside the formal economy, thereby reducing the size of South African market in terms of consumption. The government support and funding of MSMEs and cooperatives is a form of economic empowerment and transformation from our apartheid past. In other ways, the invisible hands of the market will not automatically correct the historical injustice of apartheid to ensure economic empowerment. For most township and rural area, the invisible hands of the market does not exist. The necessity of inclusive economic growth is based on economic transformation and implementation of clause in the Freedom Charter that the people shall share the wealth of the country. In this regard, the majority of the people, especially of our youth, can no longer be excluded from the meaningful participation in the economy. There must be coordinated government efforts to deal with the structural challenges impacting the pace, economic transformation, such as economic concentration, asset ownership, spatial contribution, inequality, and delimited the accelerated development of SMS. As I thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker will be the Honourable Mfagane from MK.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Chairperson, I was standing for Honourable Mfagane. Honourable Chairperson, fellow South Africans and comrades in the struggle.
Honourable Member, we've spoken about this before. Can you just remove your headgear, please? Your cap.
Oh, I thought there's no MK. Yes, fine.
No, just please remove it. You are on TV. So I think your supporters also want to see your face.
Okay, Chair. I was not expecting this one.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Chairperson, fellow South Africans and comrades in the struggle for true freedom, the year 2024 marked a turn of events where people gave the MK party a clear mandate to complete the unfinished business of liberation, to radically transform this economy so that the black majority in townships and villages move from the margins to the center of this country's economic life. I stand to speak about acceleration support for small enterprises, cooperatives, and entrepreneurs in our township and villages through financial inclusion, infrastructure development, and regulatory relief as a mere debate, but as a commitment program of action for radical economic transformation. The face of poverty has remained black in the current dispensation. The lines of unemployment continue to run through our townships, while the indignity of hunger stalks our rural villages. The so-called growth we are told to celebrate has not reached the spaza shop owner in Wamashu, the young woman running a hair salon in Edumbe, or the cooperative of small farmers in Leboahomo. The pre-1994 economic status quo remains largely intact and still skewed towards a minority, while the black majority are spectators in their own country. It is for this reason that only a bold, radical socio-economic transformation program under Umkhonto weSizwe can unleash inclusive growth that touches the lives of our people in their various corners. Our starting point is simple. We reject a myth that township and village economy is informal and therefore marginal. It is not informal. It is excluded. It is excluded from finance, excluded from infrastructure, and struggled by regulations written for privileged elite, not for those who truly need it. The MK Party radical economic transformation means deliberately redirecting resources, power, and opportunity to spaces, not as charity, but as justice, economic reparation for centuries of disposition and 32 years of failed promises. Comrades, without finance, an entrepreneur is reduced to a simple vuyo, a mere dreamer. For too long, banks and financial institutions have behaved as if black entrepreneur is township is a risk, while it's in a big corporate, in the suburbs, it is an asset. And yes, we all know who owns those. They demand collateral from people who were denied land and assets by apartheid and by the neoliberal right-wing leaning government of so-called government of national unity. This is not risk management. It is a modern-day financial apartheid. Where are regulated targets that force development finance institutions to find and fund black businesses that require these fundings? Nowhere in sight. Or better yet, an incumbent equity and asset from 3 generations poverty-stricken South Africans? A cruel joke, if you ask me. South Africa remains a development state by name. If we continue to use the same risk metrics used used for the previously advantaged few, new risk models that are as inclusive and transformative remain an objective necessity for development. As government in waiting, Umkhonto Wesizwe Party is here to break this vicious cycle. We seek to establish people-centered banking system with a clear mandate, which is to finance township and village enterprises, cooperatives, and youth and women-owned businesses at a low interest, with flexible collateral requirements and patient repayment terms. Such an institution will not be driven by the hunger for profit, but by the mandate to create jobs, support black industrialists, and build local value chain. It will prioritize productive sectors in the manufacturing, agricultural processing, logistic, and digital services so that our townships and villages become centers of production, not just dumping grounds for alcohol and low-grade imported chicken. In addition, the MK Party will prioritize the Township and Village Enterprise Fund that provides grants and blended finance to qualifying cooperatives and small businesses that commit to employing local youth and sourcing locally produced inputs. This is radical economic transformation in practice, taking these resources of the state and directing them to those who have been locked out for generations. Honorable members, you cannot talk about entrepreneurs in a village that has no reliable water, no reliable electricity, no roads, and no digital connectivity. Our MKP economic vision recognizes that state-led infrastructure investment is an engine that will jumpstart the economy and create conditions conducive for private initiative to flourish. Right now, we call for the capacitation of coordinated infrastructure focused specifically on township and villages that will assist in upgrading township roads, building rural access roads, and improving public transport so that goods and services can move efficiently within and between communities. Bearing in mind the deliberate manipulation of electricity in our country, we call for the expansion for reliable energy supply, including mini grids and renewable energy solutions, so that small manufacturers, cold storage facilities, bakeries, and ICT hubs can operate without interruption. Investing in water, sanitation, and waste management infrastructure to ensure that our people can live, work, and trade in dignity and health can no longer be limited to white privilege. And the rollout of affordable high-speed broadband and public Wi-Fi zones in townships and village business nodes, turning them into digital marketplaces connected to the national and global economy are long overdue. Chairperson, even when our people overcome the barriers of finance and infrastructure, they are suffocated by regulations that were never designed with them in mind. Many townships and village entrepreneurs fall into non-compliance not because they are criminals, but because the state treats a spaza shop in Soweto the same way as the multinational in Sandton. Regulatory relief does not mean chaos. It means intelligent regulation that understands that the informal sector is not nonsense to be policed, but a partner to be empowered. Radical economic transformation demands that new law itself be transformed to serve the people, not to serve bureaucracy and big capital. A simplified one-stop registration system that allows a small business to register, get a tax number, open a bank account, and apply for municipal trade permits in one place, physically and online, is required. A grace period and mentorship support for new businesses, where education and assistance replace punitive fines in the first years of operation, must be extended. Tailored regulation for home-based business, street traders, and cooperative recognizes and cooperatives recognizes their specific realities instead of forcing them into frameworks designed for large cooperatives should be enforced. While targeted tax incentives for township and village enterprises that invest in machinery, training, and job creation. Honorable members, the struggle for economic freedom is also a struggle for land and productive assets. Land reform and land redistribution are not side issues. They are central to building viable village economies and strong cooperatives. Accelerated land redistribution to Black communities, particularly youth and women, paired with comprehensive financial, technical, and training support for smallholder, farm, and agricultural cooperatives is no longer a prerogative, but an obligation of those entrusted with the duty to govern. MK Party document on transforming the economy correctly notes that the private sector is on investment strike, holding capital while townships and villages collapse under unemployment and hunger. And MK government maintains that it will not back capital. It will lead such agenda and invite private sector to partner on terms that favor people's development, not only the market. Investment is not meant to be once-off charity, but a long-term sustainable partnership. This is not hostility to business. It is an invitation to build a new country. Those who cling on all privileges must understand, if the Black majority continues to feel excluded, the revolution remains inevitable. Radical economic transformation is not a threat. It is an organized, peaceful pathway to shared prosperity, the only realistic guarantee of stability. Our communities are not asking for favors. They are demanding the dividends of freedom they fought for. They are demanding a government that is agile to implementation and the impact of the economic policies. Local leaders and Amakosi must be at the table and entrusted with championing these transformative economic policies. As I conclude, I must reiterate that the radical economic transformation rooted in the daily realities of our people moves us from speeches to implementation, from promises to scalable businesses, and from exclusion to township. Our people have waited for too long. Let us reserve special shops for the South Africans, accelerate support for small enterprises and entrepreneurs in our township and villages, and share the country's wealth with these rightful owners. Not next year, not in the next manifesto, but now. Kwaza mkonto kwaza.
And now your time is up, Honorable Mkhize. Thank you very much. Thank you. As I hand over to the Honorable Douglas, who will preside over the remainder of this mini plenary, I call on the Honorable Dikgale to deliver input. Honorable Dikgale.
Thank you very much. Greetings to you, Honorable House Chair. In 1994, the country became a democracy and the majority of the population won political freedom, but economic freedom remained an elusive goal. In a sense, economic apartheid persisted. Therefore, democratic government inherited the structural challenge of poverty, inequality, unemployment, and historic economic exclusion. Historic economic exclusion meant that the majority of the population could not participate in legitimate economic activity in the formal economy. It also meant that the majority of the population were excluded from acquiring assets and faced financial barriers and hurdles, which have continued in the democratic South Africa, even though the ANC-led government ensured policy legislation and in regulation that economic opportunities were created for the majority of the population to correct the historic injustice of the apartheid past. In other words, the MAT has not as yet been able to fix that. Therefore, dealing with the financial challenges faced by the Black MSMEs and cooperatives to raise development finance is critical to ensure the accelerated development of small enterprises and cooperatives in townships and villages. It is within this context that ANC-led government has introduced programs and entitles to assist the MSMEs and cooperatives to develop as a means of economic empowerment and a driver of economic growth. While much progress has been made in the development of MSMEs and cooperatives, this progress requires acceleration to ensure much higher levels of inclusive economic growth and job creation to reverse the structural challenges of poverty, inequalities, unemployment, and historic economic exclusion. MSMEs and cooperatives economically punch above their weight in terms of their contribution to the fiscus. The total tax contribution for the 2024-25 fiscal year, the SMEs segment contributed for 466 billion rands, which represent approximately 28% of the total tax revenue collected by SARS. The 2026-27 projection by the SARS Commissioner noted that for the 2025-26 and 2026-27 period, 28.56% of the total revenue target is expected from SMMEs. This is no small contribution to the fiscus and can be grown through the accelerated growth of the sector, thereby reducing government debt furthermore. The missing middle, which are 165,000 businesses representing the missing middle or smaller formal entities, pay roughly 36% of total corporate tax, highlighting their disproportionate importance to tax revenue. For those in the House who believe that there should not be government support for the sector, we argue that it is imperative to invest in the engine of future economic growth. MSMEs positively contribute to inclusive economic growth and job creation by the accelerated development of MSMEs, and not this was clearly indicated by Honorable Malematja. However, we need as government to deal with the challenges afflicting the sector to ensure that accelerated development of the sector can occur. Many MSMEs do survive, but the first year of their operation data suggests that less than 40% to 50% of new MSMEs in South Africa survive past their first year of operation. In fact, some reports indicate that as many as 70% to 80% of small businesses fail within their first 5 years. It is well-known fact that Black entrepreneurs, even if they are skilled, are unable to access a venture capital or developmental finance, even with a bankable business plan. This is due to the fact that the majority of Black people lack assets. Those parties who support that government should not be supporting the sector in terms of funding should undergo a reality check. In reality, Black small businesses face significant challenges assessing finance due to stringent credit checks, high debt costs, and lack of patient capital, especially if you are a Black. The financial sector are quick to provide personal credit to Black people and leave them in debt, but are not forthcoming when it comes to business development finance. This was especially true during COVID-19, when government guaranteed support of 200 billion rands for supporting MSMEs, but the financial institution only loaned 18 billion rands. This is indicative of the fact that the apartheid status quo prevails through economic apartheid. Transformation of the financial sector by government is imperative to ensure access to finance to accelerate the development of MSMEs and cooperatives. It is imperative that there is appropriate financial support for MSMEs in terms of venue capital based on sound business plans, as well as ensuring that cost of capital does not remain high. High levels of debt due to the cost of capital of the sector negatively impacts on the development of these enterprises. In simple English, Black people do not have the levels of equity required to raise debt. Therefore, government funding through SETFA is necessary for development of sector. These businesses are also prone to working capital constraints due to high levels of debt and due to late payments from clients, which places them in financial distress. Government needs to pay the sector timeously. Working capital constraints are also a factor of a lack of market access, which enables a higher revenue streams, whilst also having to compete with established businesses, even in township, due to market concentration. While the department has a program to assist this business to gain market access, as well as for reporting goods, the program is far too small to make an impact. This is a factor of the fact that department is underfunded. Cheaper finance is required to ensure not only accelerated development of MSMEs, but also ensure a higher success rate and growth in the sector. This means that cheaper interest rates need to be charged by state institutions such as SETFA. It is imperative that the transaction costs of this business be reduced through the ensuring that utility prices are discounted for electricity, water, and enable cheaper logistic regulated pricing most the reviewed, as it is causing structural inflation in the economy and increasing the cost structure of business, making the sector uncompetitive. We have seen the city of Cape Town losing its case on utility charges as they lead in ensuring structural inflation in the economy as they are unable to control their costs. The department needs to enhance skills development in business management and administration, as well as financial skills to ensure business efficiency. The current economic environment clearly indicates that MSMEs can drive inclusive economy development and job creation through microeconomic development and serve as an engine for economic growth. Therefore, we need to ensure that economic incentives and benefits of industrial parks and agro-processing zones in urban and rural areas accrue to MSMEs to ensure accelerated development. In conclusion, in the final analysis, accelerated development of the sector must be approximately financed. Chairperson, I thank you, and this is me. This was me. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Bill. Much appreciated. The next speaker will be from the Democratic Alliance, Honourable Kruger. Please take the floor.
Dankie, Voorsitter. South Africa does not have a small business problem. We have a government problem. Today, I'm not speaking on opinion, but on evidence. When we study the findings of the AG report, looking at SETFA and listening to the lived experience of entrepreneurs in South Africa, it becomes clear that the system that claim to support this sector are failing our people. The service delivery of the ecosystem in which our small businesses, cooperatives, and informal businesses must operate in our municipalities is just not acceptable. It's economically destructive. The AG has repeatedly flagged poor maintenance of infrastructure, weak asset management, and failure to implement consequence management. Infrastructure failure is a direct attack on small businesses' economic survival in rural areas. The AG office also found that many municipalities outside the Western Cape, of course, still receive qualified audits or disclaimers, alarming findings on performance, weak consequence management, and wait for it, billions lost in irregular expenditure. SETFA's footprint in rural South Africa is a nightmare for entrepreneurs in these areas. They must travel hundreds of kilometers on dusty and disintegrated roads just to arrive at a wall of red tape. Chairperson, sorry. With South Africa's statistics of unemployment, we as politicians forget some parties other than others, that behind every statistic is a real human being. A father unable to provide, a mother struggling to feed her children, a younger graduate sitting at home without hope, and a small business owner drowning in regulations, power interruptions, crime, corruption, and the collapsing local government. Our unemployment crisis is not just an economic crisis. It's a social crisis, a dignity crisis, and a political crisis. Many small businesses are not failing because entrepreneurial mistakes. They are failing because the ecosystem is working against them. Chairperson, MSME's daily challenges are the following, but not limited to. The municipalities cannot fix potholes. Water infrastructure collapses. Electricity outages are in the order of the day, and government departments take months to pay suppliers, and corruption money. Countries succeed in reducing unemployment, not so.
Honourable members, Honourable Jonas, excuse me, Honourable member. Honourable members, please make sure you mute your mics. Thank you very much. Please continue.
Chairperson, just check my time, please. Countries that succeeded in reducing unemployment did not so through overregulation. They succeeded by making it easy to do business, easier to hire workers, easier to start enterprises, easier to invest, and easier to manage the cost of doing business. South Africa should be entrepreneurial capital of Africa. We have resilient people. We have innovation. We have untapped royal economies. We have young people desperate for opportunity. When South Africa voted in the last election, they sent a clear message. They were tired of excuses, tired of political theory, and tired of a government that talks about economic growth while small businesses continue to collapse under the weight of red tape, corruption, and failing service delivery. The formation of the GNU created an opportunity to place economic growth and job creation ahead of party politics. And nowhere is it more visible than in the work being done by the Democratic Alliance Deputy Minister of Small Business Development. The DA has consistently argued that the economic inclusion comes through opportunity for all, and that principle is being to influence how small business development is approached nationally. There is an increasing recognition that overregulation destroys MSMEs before they even have the opportunity to grow. There is a stronger conversation around cutting red tape, simplify compliance, measuring the cost of doing business, and making government support more accessible to ordinary entrepreneurs. Importantly, there is also growing pressure for proper oversight and clean governance within SETFA and the department. Taxpayers' money allocated for small business support must produce real businesses, real growth, and real jobs. This is why the DA's role in the GNU remains critically important. It provides a voice for reform, accountability, economic realism, and growth-driven policy. The success of the Deputy Minister is not about political titles. It's about shifting the culture of government toward delivery, accountability, and enabling entrepreneurship. Because when small businesses succeed, communities succeed. When entrepreneurs grow, jobs are created. When local economies thrive, poverty declines. South Africa's future will not be built only in boardrooms or government offices. It will be built in small workshops, township saloons, family-owned farms, spaza shops, startups, companies, and rural enterprises run by ordinary people who simply want a fair chance to succeed. If we're serious about tackling unemployment, then MSMEs must become the center of economic policy, not an afterthought. Because every small business that survives creates hope. Every enterprise that succeeds creates jobs. And every regulation we remove creates room for economic freedom. Every cent we spend must be free for all. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker will be from the EFF, Honourable Matulewa. Please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The economic freedom fighters rises to expose the hypocrisy of the government that speaks endlessly about supporting small enterprises, cooperatives and entrepreneurs in townships and villages, while maintaining an economic system that excludes the Black majority from meaningful participation in the economy. Township and village economies are not collapsing because our people lack ideas, discipline, or entrepreneurial spirit. They are collapsing because the state has surrendered economic power to white monopoly capital, foreign retail domination, commercial banks, and corrupt procurement system that continues to marginalize Black people. Today, a young person in a village with a brilliant business idea cannot access funding without collateral, cannot access reliable electricity, cannot access the proper roads, cannot access water, cannot access internet connectivity, and is suffocated by the endless bureaucracy. Yet billion-rand corporations continue to receive incentives, tax relief, and protection from the same government that abandons informal traders and cooperatives. House Chairperson, le department ngokwayo kwi-policies zayo iphinde futhi iziphike. NgoMarch apha kulo 2026 i-cooperative development and support program eya-advertiswa eye-funding for i-category A cooperatives, targeting so-called startup cooperatives operating at a small scale. Yet the same program demands that these startups cooperatives must already have a turnover of up to 250 per annum. But mababe nayo ne minimum ye 5,000 rand kwi-bank yabo. Bazoyithatha phi i-250 unyaka wonke? Umuntu oqalisayo uzoyithatha phi ibalance ye 5,000 rand? How does government claim to support people who are starting from nothing while requiring them to already have money before assistance can be accessed? This requirement is fundamentally exclusionary. It locks out the poor and the working class, particularly young Black people in villages and townships who have ideas but no inherited wealth, no collateral, and no access to financial systems. The truth is that banks in South Africa remains deeply hostile to township entrepreneurs and cooperatives. They demand collateral from people whose families are deliberately dispossessed of land and wealth through colonization and apartheid. This is economic racism in practice. House Chairperson, let us speak about the lived realities of our own people. Eastern Cape, Ward 12, Chairperson, window yaselundini, Pop-up. A business called Masoga Mixed Farming operating in Popopo. This farming enterprise isebenza ngaphandle kogesi, ngaphandle kwamanzi, ngaphandle kwe-infrastructure, and without any funding support from this particular government. Yet, government speaks about agriculture development and rural industrialization. How does a farming enterprise succeed without umbani namanzi? In KwaZulu-Natal kwindawo yase-Ward 15 eNquthu municipality endaweni yaseMzinyathi district, iKhuthala Multi-Enterprise Pty Ltd operates in the Hlati Dam area. This business also operates without water and has never received any meaningful government support. These are not isolated incidents, Chairperson. These are the daily realities of a Black business across South Africa. Government cannot claim to support entrepreneurs while entrepreneurs operate under the conditions of underdevelopment. The EFF therefore rejects the anti-black economic structure that treats townships and village economies as the secondary to big corporations. We call for the establishment of the state-owned bank that will provide accessible low interest in financial to townships, businesses, cooperatives, and informal traders without exploitative collateral requirements. We call for massive public investment in roads, water infrastructure, electricity storage facilities, internet connectivity, and industrial hubs in villages and townships. We call for government procurement quotas that forces municipalities, provinces, and state entities to buy goods and services from local cooperatives and township businesses. We call for the cancellation of the unnecessary licensing and bureaucratic barriers that suffocate small businesses before they even begin operating. Most importantly, we call for the economic system that places Black people at the center of development, not at the margins of survival. House chairperson, small enterprises and cooperatives do not need motivational speeches. They need land, infrastructure, electricity, water, and funding markets, and the state protection chairperson. Apha kulo government asifuni lento kuthiwe abantu maba-aplaye kungathiwa uba kufunwa abantu abangaphi kule nto ye-asset assist. Emveni koko kusithiwa banikezwe an automated message ethi baninzi abantu aba-aplayileyo. Kanjani kungathiwa ukuba bangaphi abantu ofanele be-aplaye? Ngobani abanikiweyo? Siyabulela kakhulu, chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker will be from the IFP, Honourable Lutuli. You may take the floor. Thank you.
Honourable Chair, honourable members, it's Member Alco Ngobese. I will stand in for Inkosi Lutuli, who has challenges in connectivity. May I?
Thank you. You may go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And let me just, there we go. Honourable Chairperson, across our country, rural communities report higher unemployment rates than their urban counterparts. The IFP strongly believes that this disparity must be tackled through practical, effective solutions. In 2019, our late founder, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, described South Africans as a nation of workers, even when unemployment is high. 7 years later, these words still ring true. South Africans remains a nation of hard workers, yet tens of thousands of citizens lack formal jobs. The IFP is actively working towards a future in which both rural and urban citizens have a stability, fulfilling employment. To achieve this, we believe as the IFP that support for small businesses, cooperatives, and entrepreneurs in rural areas must be boosted. The IFP strongly favors channeling more resources into financial inclusion initiative, infrastructural development, and regulatory relief programs. We need to encourage the establishment of small enterprises. We must streamline the administrative processes that currently restrict people from starting businesses by decreasing excessive bureaucratic red tape. Rural citizens will find it easier to pursue entrepreneurship. This type of practical regulatory relief is a key part of the IFP's plan to boost employment opportunities outside urban areas. For a small business to flourish, they must also be provided with appropriate infrastructural support. Businesses are immensely valuable in rural areas. When one entrepreneur establishes a business, they empower the wider community through a job creation and increased financial stability. In our manifesto, the IFP proposes the township business cooperatives be supported through establishment of a local economic development grant. Cooperatives are highly valuable to rural communities as they bring collective economic benefit. Consequently, we must implement practical measures to encourage their existence. We must further ensure that the bulk of those job opportunities are reserved for South African citizens. The IFP is committed to ensuring that the small enterprises market is largely composed of local South African businesses. This is in line with our goal of making sure local citizens are prioritized for employment opportunities, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, South Africans in rural areas are no less deserving of employment opportunities. They are equal as hardworking and dedicated as urban dwellers. They must be afforded more opportunity to increase their standard of living and establish thriving communities. This can only be achieved if our government takes decisive action. This time has passed for us. The time has passed for us to speculate of how to tackle unemployment in the rural areas. I thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker will be from the Patriotic Alliance. Honourable Peters, you may take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair, and good morning, Honourable Members. On behalf of the Patriotic Alliance, I rise today to affirm that the future of South Africa's economy lies not only in boardrooms and big corporations, but in the still dusty streets of our townships and the villages of our people. It is here that entrepreneurs innovate daily, where cooperatives sustain families, and where inclusive growth can truly take root. Financial inclusion must be accelerated. Township and village entrepreneurs remain locked out of affordable credit and banking services. We must expand access to microfinance and development of funding so that their ideas can flourish into sustainable business. Infrastructure development is urgent. No cooperative or enterprise can thrive without reliable electricity, transport, broadband, and water. By investing in township and village infrastructure, we unlock the potential of thousands of enterprises that are ready to compete and contribute to our local economy. Regulatory relief is essential. Red tape suffocates small businesses. Simplifying registration, reducing compliance cost, and streamlining procurement will allow entrepreneurs to focus on growth rather than bureaucracy. Supporting township entrepreneurship and cooperatives is not charity, it is justice. It is about correcting the structural inequalities of our past and building a future where opportunity is shared. If we accelerate financial inclusion, infrastructure development, and regulatory relief, we will unleash the full power of our people's creativity and resilience. The prosperity of our townships and villages is the prosperity of South Africa. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker will be from the Freedom Front Plus. Do we have a speaker from the Freedom Front Plus on the platform?
Ja. Baie dankie, agbare huisvoorsitter, Wynand Boshoff van die Vryheidsfront Plus. Dit is 'n interessante ding dat baie waarnemers sal dink dat die Vryheidsfront Plus eintlik niks uit te waai het of hom nie sal moeg maak met die ontwikkeling van entrepreneurs in afgeleë plattelandse gebiede, townships of soortgelyke gebiede nie. Niks kan verder van die waarheid afwees nie. Want in Suid-Afrika se ekonomie om te floreer, moet almal in die land floreer. Niemand kan 'n standpunt inneem dat hierdie of daardie armoede pla my nie of raak my nie. Daarom dat die ontwikkeling van entrepreneurskap waar ook al om die ekonomie aan te dryf, ook vir die Vryheidsfront van allergrootste belang is. Nou, is daar baie teoretiese goed waarna mens kan kyk om te sê in die eerste plek is entrepreneurskap iets wat binne in 'n mens is, dis iets wat maak dat jy lus het om waarde toe te voeg, geld daai te maak, werk daarmee te skep. Dis eenvoudig deel van party mense se persoonlikheidsamestelling meer as van ander mense se, en daarom dat 'n mens werkgewers en werknemers het. En dit is so dat dit moet makliker gemaak word vir mense om hierdie werk te doen deur administratiewe rompslomp te verminder, deur dit makliker te maak om jou besigheid te begin en om die werk te doen. En dit is ook nie asof dit net swart mense is wie se maatskappye sukkel om kop bo water te hou kort na die stigting nie. Dit geld vir almal. Elkeen wat 'n nuwe besigheid begin, gaan deur daai geweldige sterk leerkurwe en maak dit dikwels nie. Die vraag is of 'n mens die mislukking wat daarmee gepaard gegaan het kan omskep in 'n leerervaring in plaas van iets wat jou moedeloos maak. Nou in daardie opsig is dit vir my baie belangrik om veral te praat oor finansiële insluiting. Ons beleef 'n tyd van toenemende digitalisering van die wêreld, wat beteken dat daar nie meer mense in die bank is wat sit en 'n besluit neem en te sê hierdie lening ken ek toe of hierdie ene gaan ek nie toeken nie op grond van die karakter van die persoon wat leen of wat hulle van die persoon weet nie. Dit is al hoe meer 'n digitale besluit, die goed word ingelees en as daar nie volgens die vooraf geformuleerde parameters kredietwaardigheid is nie, dan word die lening afgekeur. Dit gaan nie oor swart of wit of diskriminasie of voortsetting van vorige diskriminasie nie. Dit gaan doodgewoon daaroor dat die persoon uit die lening uitgehaal word. As hierdie departement iets sinvol wil doen, dan moet hy seker maak dat hy leners begelei en dat hy daarmee die vertroue skep, sodat finansiële instellings wel die geld vir ondernemers kan leen. Baie dankie.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker will be from Action SA. Honourable Beasley, you may take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, House Chair. Small businesses are not a side issue in South Africa's economy. They are the backbone of job creation, innovation, and the local economic survival. From township spaza shops to rural cooperatives, from informal traders to growing SMEs, these businesses carry communities through economic hardship while government too often stands in their way. One of the metrics Action SA uses to measure government success in creating an enabling environment for entrepreneurs is the Small Business Growth Index, compiled by ABSA, SACCI, and the Bureau of Market Research at UNISA. Action SA's benchmark is clear. South Africa should be scoring above 75 if we are serious about sustainable growth and job creation. But South Africa's current score is just 51.08. That is not a thriving small business environment. It's an economy where entrepreneurs remain vulnerable to crime, collapsing infrastructure, overregulation, and economic exclusion. And nowhere is this crisis more visible than in our townships and our villages. Chair, through Action SA's Spaza for Local campaign, we have highlighted how compliant local businesses are being undercut by illicit and unregulated trade operating in plain sight. This is not about xenophobia, it's about fairness and the rule of law. When businesses evade tax, ignore labor laws, sell illicit or counterfeit goods, or operate outside municipal regulations, compliant entrepreneurs cannot compete. The consequences are severe. Local businesses lose income, workers lose jobs, communities lose economic activity, and the state loses desperately needed revenue. Illicit trade destroys legitimate township and rural economies, while government looks the other way. If government wants to accelerate support for SMEs and entrepreneurs, the enforcement against illicit trade must become an economic priority. But enforcement alone is not enough. Entrepreneurs in townships and villages still struggle to access finance because they lack collateral, formal banking relationships, or political connections. Government support programs are often bureaucratic, inaccessible, and slow. At the same time, businesses are expected to survive without reliable electricity, safe roads, functioning water infrastructure, or broadband connectivity. And instead of reducing barriers, government continues to drown small business in red tape, licensing delays, and compliance costs that largely corporations can absorb far more easily. House Chair, South Africans do not lack entrepreneurial spirit. What they lack is a government willing to create an environment where honest businesses can grow, compete fairly, and create jobs. The entrepreneur in township container shops, the family cooperative in a rural village, and the small manufacturing trying to expand their business do not want handouts. They want safety. They want fair competition. They want functioning infrastructure. And they want a government that backs compliant businesses instead of allowing illicit trade and state failures to destroy them. That is how we build real economic inclusion. That is how we restore dignity through work. That is how we grow South Africa's economy from the ground up. I thank you, House Chair.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be from the ACDP. Honourable Thrink, you may take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable House Chairperson. The ACDP acknowledges that South Africa stands at a crossroads. In our townships and villages, millions of resilient citizens are not asking for handouts, but for opportunity. If we are serious about inclusive growth, we must accelerate support for small enterprises, cooperatives, and entrepreneurs through meaningful financial inclusion, reliable infrastructure, and sensible regulatory relief. The ACDP recognizes small businesses as the backbone of any thriving economy. Yet in our communities, they are too often constrained by limited access to capital, high compliance costs, and inadequate basic services. Financial inclusion must go beyond rhetoric. It requires expanding access to affordable credit, strengthening community banking models, and supporting innovative financial instruments that reach informal traders and startups. When capital flows to the grassroots, enterprise flourishes. The ACDP has consistently called for infrastructure maintenance and development. This is critical, as no business can grow without consistent water, electricity, safe transport networks, and digital connectivity. Investing in townships and rural infrastructure is not a social expense. It is an economic multiplier. It unlocks productivity, reduces costs, and connects entrepreneurs to markets. We must also confront the regulatory burden that stifles small enterprises. Simplified compliance frameworks and reduced red tape and targeted tax incentives can unleash entrepreneurship at scale. The ACDP believes that by creating an enabling environment where compliance supports growth rather than suppresses it, this is a must. However, support for small enterprises must be part of a broader economic shift. South Africa cannot continue exporting raw materials while importing finished goods at a higher cost. Beneficiation is essential. It creates economies of scale. By processing our minerals and resources locally, we can build industries, create jobs, and retain value within our economy. This requires a deliberate structural transformation, one that aligns industrial policy, trade policy, and skills development. Supporting small businesses must go hand in hand with investing in skills training, apprenticeships, and entrepreneurship education. This is the key to addressing unemployment, poverty, and inequality in South Africa, because a capable workforce is the engine of sustainable growth. As kingdom builders, the African Christian Democratic Party believes that support for small enterprises, it is not optional, it is a must, and it is urgent. And through financial inclusion, infrastructure development, regulatory reform, and a bold economic policy shift towards beneficiation and meaningful structural change, it is possible to build an economy that works for all South Africans, including small businesses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker will be from the UDM, Honourable Nontenja. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. Honourable House Chair, in many of our townships and rural villages, entrepreneurs do not fail because of lack of ideas, but because the system is not built for them. They operate without access to affordable finance, reliable infrastructure, or supportive regulation. From spaza shop to cooperatives, From informal traders to young digital entrepreneurs, the potential is undeniable. Yet, this potential remains locked out of the formal economy, not by choice, but by circumstances. We cannot continue to speak about economic growth while ignoring the very people who sustain local economies. And we cannot claim inclusion while millions remain excluded from meaningful opportunities. Small, medium, and micro enterprises contribute an estimated 34% to South Africa's GDP and account for approximately 60% of employment. Yet, many, especially in townships and rural areas, remain undersupported and underfunded. Less than 15% of small businesses can access formal credit, forcing many to rely on costly informal finance. Expanding access to affordable credit and digital financial services can bring millions into formal economy. At the same time, unreliable electricity, limited internet access, and poor transport infrastructure continue to constrain business growth and opportunity. The United Democratic Movement reiterates that small enterprises, cooperatives, and township entrepreneurs need to be put at the center of the country's economic agenda. This requires bold action, which means expanding financial inclusion, investing in infrastructure, and removing unnecessary regulatory barriers. This country needs an economy that works not only for the few, but for the many. An economy that reaches into every township, every village, and every community. Honorable House Chair, it's time to walk the talk. Rhetoric can never expand our economic growth, and it will never implement inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker will be from RISE. Is there a speaker from RISE on the floor? Second call on RISE. Is there a speaker from RISE on the floor? No, then we'll move on to BOSA. BOSA, Honourable Slazo Webster, you may have the floor. Honourable Slazo Webster from BOSA, are you here? No, then we will move on to the ANC. Honourable Bilankulu.
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, ministers and deputy ministers, honourable members, compatriots and fellow South Africans. As I rise on behalf of the African National Congress, I am reminded that on the 8th May is a memorable day in the history of our young nation when Parliament convened to adopt the final constitution in 1996 with 87% majority. That historical moment marked the birth of a new nation founded on the values of non-racialism, non-sexist, democracy, prosperity, and unity in diversity. On that solemn day, the then Deputy President and later President of the Republic, His Excellency Thabo Mbeki, delivered a seminal speech titled, "I Am an African," which still echoes with reasonable to this day in every corner of our beautiful country and beyond. On that occasion, with the reference of the Constitution, he said, "It aims to open the doors so that those who were disadvantaged can assume their place in society as equals with their fellow human beings without regards to color, race, gender, age, or geographical dispersal." This is the essence of the transformative program that ensures that all and sundry are able to trade freely and participate in the economy without restrictions or barriers to entry that constrains their growth and developmental potential. This journey of transformation and economic inclusion remains valid, and we applaud the wisdom of the ANC for implementing interventions that accelerate economic inclusion to give expression to the constitutional values of common prosperity. Honorable House Chair, the main thrust of my contribution to this debate centers around the necessity of removal regulatory hurdles that frustrate progress and growth of micro, small, and medium enterprises and cooperatives. It is imperative that the regulatory hurdles are reduced to ensure the ease of business of the accelerated developmental of MSMEs and cooperatives. We must explicitly commend the Minister without any ambiguity about setting as strategic priority one of the duty of cutting red tape and improvement of the ease of doing business for MSMEs. In fact, the department has identified 28 regulations that must undergo reforms to reduce administrative burdens for MSMEs. In addition, over 100 municipalities will be supported in adopting the e-regulation system to streamline business formations. The department will facilitate the adoption of 14 red tape reduction indicators across national and provincial departments and municipalities to strengthen accountability and compliance performance. In the consistent pursuit of the strategic imperative of economic inclusion, as articulated in the medium-term development policy, the department has a number of programs which facilitate the development of MSMEs and cooperatives in townships and rural areas. These programs include the She Trade, which focuses on the development of women-owned businesses, franchise fund, a fund designed for youth to start and manage franchise through loans and vouchers. Township and rural enterprises support programs which assist informal, micro and small businesses in townships in both urban and rural areas. Honorable House Chairperson and honorable members, let me also state categorically that the department has committed to prove support to over 200 MSMEs to participate in global trade missions, exhibitions, and digital export platforms to enhance export readiness and increase foreign revenue generation. A further 150 MSMEs will be assisted to access domestic procurement opportunities, suppliers development programs, and trade platforms to strengthen local industry linkages. These are not fantasies, but concrete interventions that are meant to boost the performance of MSMEs sector to contribute to the objective of economic growth. This is a relatively young department with a modest budget, but its work is impressive and its impact is unable. Honorable House Chairperson, recently the sponsorship fund was launched, but disbursement of funds for support of the sector has remained slow due to the slow licensing processes by municipalities. To respond to this problem in a sustainable way, the department will be introducing the business licensing bill to Parliament once it is approved by Cabinet. As part of the drive towards active participation of MSMEs beyond the services sector, the department needs to prioritize the broadening of the township economy and industrial parks and agro-processing zones to ensure that there is a space of a new MSMEs and cooperatives. Honorable House Chair, our government cannot leave cooperatives behind because they give effect to the idea of democratic ownership of the means of production. As part of the accelerating the growth and development of MSMEs and cooperatives in urban and rural areas, it is critical to ensure that these businesses are harnessed to grow and move from micro to small and then to medium enterprises. In a modern economy, it is important to roll out the enabling infrastructure and digital capabilities for the accelerated development of the sector. In this regard, over the medium term, 52 business infrastructures, including product mix and MSMEs hubs, will be refurbished or built, and in addition, 200 MSMEs and cooperatives supported through the Business Infrastructure Support Program with equipment, tools, machinery, technology, and energy support. In conclusion, Honorable House Chairperson, in acknowledging the strides we have made in the MSME sector, let me borrow from the words of our standing statement, His Excellency Thabo Mbeki, in the address, when he said, whoever we may be, whatever our immediate interest, however much we carry baggage from our past, however much we have been caught by the fashion of cynicism and loss of faith in the capacity of people, let us today and say, nothing can stop us now. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Member. I'm going to call on the following parties. They are not presently on the platform, but I will give them the opportunity to respond. The next speaker from ATM. Is there a speaker from ATM on the floor? No. Al-Jamar. Is there a speaker from Al-Jamar on the floor? No. NCC? No. Honorable from UAT? There's no speaker from the UAT. The next speaker will be from the DA. Honorable Singh, you may take the floor. Thank you.
Honorable Chairperson, South Africa cannot speak seriously about economic growth, job creation, or reducing inequality without speaking about small enterprises, cooperatives, and entrepreneurs operating in our townships and villages. For millions of South Africans, these businesses are survival. They are school fees, food on the table, and hope for families trying to build a better future. Yet, too many township and rural entrepreneurs remain trapped by barriers that make success unnecessarily difficult. Poor infrastructure, limited access to finance, collapsing municipal services, and policy frameworks that fail to recognize the realities facing micro, small, and medium enterprises. If we are serious about supporting MSMEs, we must create an environment where small businesses can survive and grow. One of the greatest challenges facing MSMEs is the automatic extension of collective bargaining agreements negotiated by large employers and trade unions to small businesses that were never part of those negotiations and often cannot afford the terms agreed upon. A small township business employing 3 or 4 people cannot be regulated in the same way as a large corporation employing thousands. Excessive labor costs and rigid bargaining council agreements can discourage employment and force small businesses to close. It was for this reason that I proposed that the minister conclude a memorandum of agreement with the relevant cabinet ministers to end the automatic extension of these agreements to MSMEs. This recommendation was accepted into the Portfolio Committee report and adopted by this House. Importantly, worker protections would remain fully in place through the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, which already provides substantial safeguards while allowing greater flexibility for small businesses. House Chair, we must also have an honest conversation about empowerment policy. After decades of BBBEE implementation, South Africa still faces devastating unemployment, poverty, and inequality. A fundamental question must therefore be asked. At what point will individuals who have already significantly benefited from empowerment policies ever be regarded as empowered and move out of the category of beneficiaries in order to make way for others who remain genuinely excluded from economic opportunity? Under the current system, the same individuals can continue benefiting repeatedly, while many truly disadvantaged South Africans, particularly small entrepreneurs in townships and rural communities, remain excluded from meaningful economic participation. This is one of the fundamental reasons why the current system has failed to produce the broad-based economic inclusion and empowerment outcomes South Africans were promised. It was for this reason that I proposed, in line with the National Development Plan, the department should align its programs more directly with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and that BBBEE requirements for MSMEs be removed, with support instead based on need, viability, innovation, and growth potential. These recommendations were also accepted into the Portfolio Committee report and adopted by Parliament. What is deeply concerning, however, is that despite Parliament adopting these recommendations, the Minister of Small Business Development appears to have no intention of implementing them. That is unacceptable. Parliamentary committee processes cannot become meaningless exercises where recommendations are adopted by this House and then simply ignored by the executive. House Chair, infrastructure development remains critical. No entrepreneur can succeed where roads are collapsing, electricity supply is unreliable, water interruptions are common, public lighting is failing, and internet connectivity is poor or unaffordable. Infrastructure is economic development. And this is where the difference between governments become clear. The Western Cape, under a DA government, has an unemployment rate more than 10 percentage points lower than the national average. That is not by accident. It is the result of governments that understand that economic growth depends on the functioning infrastructure, good governance, and an enabling environment for businesses. DA governments work. Roads are maintained. Public spaces are kept clean. Water and electricity systems function properly. Municipal processes are more efficient and predictable. Financial management is stronger and corruption is not tolerated. These things matter enormously to small businesses. A spaza shop owner cannot operate effectively in darkness because streetlights do not work. Businesses cannot grow where water and electricity interruptions are constant. Compare this with ANC-run municipalities like Johannesburg and Mfuleni, where infrastructure collapse and failing service delivery continue to drive away investment and make economic activity increasingly difficult. EWN reported that in Mfuleni alone, an average of 36 businesses has gone into liquidation every month this year, while those remaining battle water shortages, unreliable water supply, and sewage piling up. South Africa's entrepreneurs do not lack resilience or determination. What they lack is an enabling environment. If we get this right, we will create jobs, grow local economies, and restore opportunity in communities too often left behind. Because inclusive economic growth will not be built only in corporate boardrooms, but in township streets, rural villages, and small businesses across our country. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The last speaker for the day will be from the ANC, Honourable Malematja. Please, you may have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, as I take this opportunity and thank the latter speakers, in particular, Honourable Lekhale, the Chair of the PC, Honourable Bilankulu, for quoting Thabo Mbeki when he was dealing with economic justice that has to come to deal with the legacy of apartheid that made sure that those who own the land are becoming passive participants in their own economy. As Chair, there's no universal panacea for the accelerated development of small business and cooperative in township and villages, and only mature policy conversation can determine the correct course of action. Allow me to say it is only the African National Congress through the Department of Small Business Development that has made sure that there are programs that are talking to the masses on the ground, dealing with what apartheid has done to our own masses. We have a program of asset assistance where it deals with assisting those who are in the business but with not enough equipment. We are doing that, as we can attest. In Limpopo, it has happened. In Khayelitsha, in Soweto, in Western Cape, that is where we do a lot, because our own people are sidelined by the cacophony of Jabarans who know nothing about the people instead, but just centralize everything in the CPTs as if life is only in the CPTs. In Khayelitsha, our own people, through the small business development, we have managed to give them as many as equipment, the vehicle, and further assist them in terms of the blended funding to ensure that at least they are part of this economy. But that is because of the DA that is governing the Western Cape. The DA in the Western Cape has closed every local economic program in favor of the few. And they are continuing what the apartheid has done to ensure that the land is still in the hands of the few, and the majority will continue to be the spectators in the very same economy. That is why we are saying, as the small business development, we are able to introduce the red tape reduction program, where we are enabling our own people to register their business without any hiccups. We are able to let them get the license of their business without any hiccups. All these include the permit. But in the Western Cape, there's not even a single African person who's got a working permit as per the stats of their data in the municipalities. The reason is why. The reason is that they don't want us to ever close to that. What other thing that we can tour the house is that the incubation and digital hub are rolled out to ensure that we equip, if not to mentor, those who are in the business and those who want to access the market. Simple, so that they be part of the global market, both internally and externally, so to improve their life. Ours is not about grandstanding of this, is to ensure that people in the rural area, like in the townships, they match those who are in the cities. That is why it is only the African National Congress that does not discriminate when coming to assisting the MSMEs and cooperatives. In Khayelitsha, Manzuza, we gave her tractors. As we speak today, she's on her own. In Msunduzi, we make sure that Umam Kize, she's now part of those who are in the economic global and who are in the ecosystem of that, to ensure that she's sponsoring the boxer and spa, and all our products are coming from her own farm, which was at some stage deprived by the very same ADA and a granddaughter of the apartheid system. We therefore want to thank everybody who contributed positively and ensuring that we build these MSMEs and cooperatives to change our life, as opposed to sit and increase jobless economic growth. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member, and thank you to all those who debated and for the public for participating. That concludes the debate and the business of this virtual mini plenary session. The mini plenary will now rise. Thank you and enjoy your weekend.